What's the dumbest rule your school ever enforced? Can't be standing around in groups more than 4, gang mentality. They outlawed bracelets because there was an article in a magazine somewhere saying they advertised what sexual acts you were open for based on their color. Then someone tried to outlaw wristwatches for the same reason. Locked the only boys' bathroom because someone wrote on the wall in Sharpie. It wasn't even anything rude or inappropriate either. It was just the word hi or something like that. Didn't unlock the door until one boy wet himself and parents threatened to sue. Not really a rule. But the toilet paper holders are outside of the stalls on a wall. So you have to calculate before taking a shit how much you need and hope that it was enough. Banned all backpacks, bags on campus. Students were expected to somehow carry everything they needed in hand. This was especially challenging if you had a non-ideal locker placement. I got a suspension for holding a stick. The phone call with my mom went something like this, only slightly dramatized. And GT. School. Mrs. The Quack. Your son has been suspended. And GT. And GT. Mom. Oh my goodness. What did he do? And GT. And GT. S. He was holding a stick. And GT. And GT. M. Did he hit someone with it? And GT. And GT. S. No. He was just holding it. And GT. And GT. M. Did he threaten to hit someone with it? And GT. And GT. S. No. Just held it. And GT. And GT. M. Did he refuse to put it down when you asked? And GT. And GT. S. No. No. He was very cooperative. And GT. And GT. M. So. What did he do wrong? And GT. And GT. S. He held a stick. And GT. And GT. M. And I should be upset about that? And GT. And GT. S. Absolutely. You know we have a zero tolerance policy. And GT. And GT. M. Right. Well, I'll talk with him. As you might guess, I did not get in trouble at home. We suddenly one day weren't allowed to stand in circles during recess because, and I quote, we could be dealing drugs. I will add that for the years prior we had been standing in circles no problem. Next recess, we stood in a triangle. Cue principal going apeshit. Next day we stood in a square. Principal kept us inside for a week. And threatened us all with detentions if we did it again, etc. I believe their idea was open-ended circles so they could see what we were doing. Still stupid. Edit. Wow, this blew up. I should add this was in grade 8 in Canada, middle school. Edit 2. After being told by many to post this on malicious compliance. I did. Then it got removed for being against the rules. RIP. No farting in class. They would say if you need to fart then go to the toilet, but then 9 times out of 10 if you asked to go the toilet they'd say no. Zero tolerance. Just means that if someone starts a fight with you, you fight back as hard as you can. You're going to get suspended for defending yourself anyway. Might as well make it worthwhile. You have to wear your tie all the way home. Some sad bastard teachers would stand on the main road away from the school and try to hand out detentions in presumably their own time. In grade school, we weren't allowed to play on the playground equipment when it snowed. Eventually, we weren't allowed to play with snow or even go near it. I got in trouble for sitting in snow. This was in Minnesota where it snows half the year. Recess basically consisted of milling around the blacktop for 30 minutes. Deleted. My friend is an administrator at a private school in NJ and the faculty has to sign in and out of the bathroom using Google Sheets. 9 a.m. 10 minutes. MF. When I was in junior school, UK boarding school in the 80s. We were not allowed to say okay as it was considered slang and not befitting the young ladies and gentlemen that we should aspire to be. For context, junior school covered ages 5 to 13. We also had to have a comb and a handkerchief on us at all times. On top of that, we weren't allowed to have our hands in our pockets because it looks slovenly. Don't damage school property sounds reasonable enough until you get detention for staining a chair after suddenly getting your period. Playing cards at lunch was prohibited because it promoted gambling. No slow dances at the prom. No fighting. Enforced by punishing the kids who were getting hit. We weren't allowed to wear thongs. I don't know how they caught people who did TBH. It wasn't really the rule that was dumb, but the reason for it. In my last year of high school, the school issued a rule that all students had to wear student IDs. If you didn't, you had to immediately go and pay for another ID. While you can see how many students may have saw this a way to skip class. The reason for this was the school shootings that happened the previous year. The reasoning was that it would be easier to spot who is a student and who is not a student to then see who has malicious intent. Except that most shooters were students. So, no beads. Apparently they thought beaded jewelry was gang-related? We once had a rule that we could only go to the bathroom during class. Not in the breaks. Only during class. Toilet paper rationing. This was in 1997-98. BTW. Apparently the high school girls' room was going through too much toilet paper, so the dean, a woman, stood outside the door and distributed a few squares of one-ply institutional toilet paper to us as we went in. If she noticed toilet paper on the floor, our ration got cut down. If we asked for more for bigger jobs, we were told to save it for home. There were several episodes of girls stuck in stalls until friends could beg for more TP because of period messes or unexpected bowel incidents. The dean wouldn't even hand it over. She would go in the bathroom and pass it a few squares at a time over the door. If you didn't catch it as it fell and it landed on the floor, well, that's your fault and you're not getting more. If you used more than she thought necessary, tough luck. Go to class with blood, shit on your body. It took about a week of extremely angry parents coming to the school and calling both the school and the school board. But we finally got our toilet paper back. Unlimited. How did we celebrate? By TPing her car. Of course. I was wearing a regulation uniform jacket in a classroom during winter that had no heating. The teacher demanded I remove my jacket and I refused because I was cold. She sent me to the head mistress. Rule. No duct tape on clothing. Reason. Some girls thought they could get past the no ripped jeans rule by covering the tears with duct tape. It became a fad and everyone started doing it, so it got banned. A kid in my AP literature class found a loophole and made an entire outfit out of red and black duct tape. I mean shorts, a t-shirt and a jacket and shoes. When the school tried to suspend him they couldn't because the rule was no duct tape on clothes. It said nothing about clothes made out of duct tape. He won the argument and even wore the outfit a few more times to say fuck you to the school and principal's law. Edit. This is it. This is as popular as I'll ever be. Take that, Principal Conrad. Really though, to answer a regularly asked question, ripped jeans were an issue because they made the school look trashy, not cause they showed skin. However, there were many other rules to enforce no excessive skin be shown. We would get suspended for rips in our clothes and also for duct tape on clothes, both for the same reason. It was trashy LMAO. Different staircases for boys and girls. Edit. Wow. This blew up. To clarify, this rule was enforced purely with the idea that good boys and girls don't talk to each other. The general air in the school was, don't have anything to do with the opposite gender. I was in this school for only 2 years and coming from other good co-ed school. This really weirded me out. Also, the guys would just act creepy even for a simple, can you please move out of the way? I believe this awkwardness could be prevented if there wasn't such an obvious separation between the genders. Edit 2. It wasn't a religious school. Just a general public school. Edit 3. No skirts. The uniform was similar to a salwar kameez. One particular professor at my university would lock the door a minute after class began. If you had to leave to go to the bathroom, you couldn't get back in. Somehow this ancient fossil is still teaching and pulling similar shit. Dildos were banned. The school never thought they would have to print those words. You would think it was a given. Until a senior bought 100 dildos and snuck them around the school every day for 2 weeks straight. Girls weren't allowed to show their ankles. The dean had a pack of socks in her office she would give the students and make them wear. Only girls though. This was the 2000s. My school made it compulsory to wear uniform in online classes. My high school decided to ban women's athletic shorts one day, which was ridiculous for many reasons. The next day every girl showed up in athletic shorts and the rule was removed by second block. No leaving the dorm unless it's for a fire alarm. I went to boarding school from the age of 7. That rule meant we couldn't get out of our dormitory to have a wee in the night. We had a plastic tub one of the girls brought in and went in that. Then we had to smuggle the tub to the bathroom in the morning without matron seeing. Stupid bloody rule. Edit. Everyone is saying, pee out the door, or, pee on the floor. Just imagine the punishments we got for misbehaving. Doing anything against matron would have never crossed our minds. Also, this was 80s. Early 90s. Southern England. Our punishments were pretty awful, but I survived. We all did. I'm still in touch with some of the girls I boarded with back then. We have our scars, but we're a tough lot. Second edit. Dad was in the army and they moved around a lot. So being sent away was for stability and consistency. Dumbest rule. Zero tolerance for fighting. This meant both the kid who started the fight and the kid who got beat on were both suspended. If the kid who got beat on just took it, he was just sent home for the rest of the day. If he dared to fight back, he was suspended for a week, just like the kid who started the fight. Here's the truly stupid part. The school administrators couldn't explain how this led to more brutal fights. I got detention for pooping more than 10 minutes, but I have served stomach cramps and I asked why and they had no answer. My friend nearly got suspended for wearing a trench coat. It was the late 90s. Probably didn't help that he had long hair. Was shy. And weird. Students must keep their hair short. So many. You weren't allowed to wear a coat or a backpack, always freezing with tons of books. No card games at all. 5 minutes between classes, sprawling one-story building barely leaves time to pee. If you were caught on your phone, they'd take it until the end of the week. You'd get it back at 3:30 on Friday. Parents went mental and a few even came together and sent bills through for part of the phone bills. They ditched that rule after 2 weeks. Edit. Phones were kept overnight in the school in the office until that Friday if they were confiscated. No safe or anything. Just in a plastic box. No getting it back at the end of the day. You just had to go for days without a phone. Even at home. Just in case there's any confusion around that law. Went to school during the time where health and safety suddenly started going crazy. They introduced a no contact under any circumstances rule, i.e. no touching another person. We were like 6 or 7 years old. Suddenly one day not only is tag suddenly illegal, but they actually enforced it. I remember one day like 70% of the school's population was pulled off of the playground and made to sit on the floor in the hall. For the crime of just playing the games that children play. Removed. Guys were free to wear pants in cold days, but girls had to wear a skirt no matter how cold it was. The new principal made a morning roundup rule where anyone arriving to class after the last bell had to go to the cafeteria and listen to a lecture about not being late for class. This took about an extra 15 minutes, making the students even more late to class than they would have otherwise been. Needless to say, everyone hated it, even the teachers. That principal didn't last long. Elementary school principal banned talking at lunch. If you were caught talking or even signing to someone, you had to go sit by yourself on a folding chair with no table. There was once my mom came to eat lunch with my older sister and I. The principal was like, "Oh, you should go eat out in the hallway with your daughters," and she was like, "Nah. I'm gonna sit here with my daughter and her friends and talk to them and enjoy their presence." Usually if a parent came for lunch, the student could invite one friend to join. Unless you had siblings. Then it was too many people, so you couldn't invite a friend. Anyway, one of my older sister's friends whispered to my mom that she was going to move so she wouldn't get in trouble for talking. This was a 9-year-old. They banned plain red and plain blue shirts. I was sent to the principal in elementary school for getting a drink of water out of line. As in, we walked down the hall in a formation and we had designated water drinking stops. To this day I still remember the principal asking angrily, "Well, what if everyone started getting water without permission?" And I still don't have an answer. Don't play on the golf course. Our tiny community got a burst of cash in the 70s due to having mineral rights on land with oil. It was amazing some of the things we had access to for a school in the plains in Montana: computer lab, ceramics, photography, and a freaking laser. They also bought the grade school a miniature golf course in the center of the playground. A majority of the playground was concrete squirrels, turtles and a whale. These looked like a lot of fun to play on for a kid. We couldn't touch them. We couldn't get near them. We couldn't land our Star Wars figures on them, incorporate them in our games in any way, or even walk near them when running from someone playing tag. Once in PE we got out the clubs and played a few rounds in my entire time in school. Other classes never even got that. After about 30 years, during a student cleanup, they got some of the upper-level high school kids to take hammers to them and pulverized them. Don't let your underwear show. This was directed at the girls when Madonna was in fashion. One school official went to war on visible bra straps, while no girls even attempted copying Madonna. This official was making a preemptive attack. She made announcements and would bust girls in the halls. About this time the varsity boys basketball team got new uniforms, rather than spend money on the other teams. Their old uniforms were given to the junior varsity girls team. Jerseys with huge arm and neck holes made for 17-year-old boys were now being worn by 15-year-old girls. Girls that were as active as possible and in public. If they posed for a picture, you could almost not see their bras, while playing the front of the jerseys flopped from side to side. At least one cup would be visible at any time. Suddenly girls' basketball got a lot more popular. We were not allowed to put our coats on until we were outside. During winter when we would have a storm, we had to go outside in the rain to put our coats on or face receiving a detention if we put them on in the corridor. No ripped jeans. They enforced it to the point that when I fell in school, scrapped me knee and ended up needing stitches, obviously ripping my jeans in the process. They still dragged me to the office to suspend me for the day because me jeans were ripped. I was left there, stitched up, blood drying on my jeans as the vice principal yelled at me that my outfit was inappropriate. Add on, I went to a private school outside of the US. We had a doctor on call, so he stitched me up at school. Notified my parents and gave the okay on me going back to class. The VP didn't notify my parents I was getting suspended for the day until after I went home and told them myself. Edit. Fixed wording. Clarifying some things. My school was in a poor area of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Not a lot of schools here have money for anything, because of a huge donation of books at the time I was in school. My school got an absurd number of books, including expensive ones. There were a few dumb rules. But the dumbest of them all? We basically couldn't touch the books in the library without permission. It might sound reasonable at first, but check this out. The library was huge, and there were lots of books, including contemporary classics, non-fiction like The Last Problem, English literature like Infinite Jest, How to Kill a Mockingbird and whatnot. Dude, there was so much there. That place was probably the most valuable place in the entire school. I mean, it was awesome. There were enough books there for each student to lend about 100 every day. Here's the problem. The library went all but untouched for the entirety of my time there. Why? The amount of work it took to read one of those books was ridiculous and pretty much made sure not a single student bothered to try. First, you couldn't take any of the books home. Period. Forget the fact that they had your address and all your parents' info. So in the case that someone took it and didn't return it, they could just get it back. It had happened before at least once before the rule was made. Second, you couldn't leave the library with them, no matter what. Third, if you wanted to read the book, you'd have to do it in the library at the lunch break, which was about 45 minutes. So unless you weren't hungry ever, you had only a few minutes to go to the library. It was only open for a few hours around the break and not at all at any other time. So unless you stayed there for hours until the break for the afternoon classes, you just wouldn't have another chance. Those hours around the break could be used for you to be tutored by a teacher, which almost never happened. Fourth, once you went through all of that, you could only read the book under the observation of the people that volunteered to work in the library for credit, which was never more than 2 or 3 people. Sometimes no one. Which means that if you got there and there were already 3 people there, forget it. Unless you were willing to read it standing up close to where the book was kept, and even then they'd check on you every minute or so. Fifth, you couldn't get inside the library with a backpack, with food, in groups, speaking, without the appropriate uniform. You couldn't get in with the gym one, for instance, with other books, earrings, necklaces, or anything that could make noise while you were walking. Some were reasonable, but the issue was that one simple mistake and you would get banned. Sixth, any banishment from it was permanent. I complained about it once in the second year and was never allowed inside ever again. I even tried to get some teachers to help me. But it didn't work. 7. And probably the dumbest. Only the students that had a certain amount of high grades could get any book at all. If you got something like 4/10 on your last biology exam, you couldn't even get inside the library. The standard was so insane. Only 6 other students and I in my classroom had enough good grades to get books. In all my time there, the library was basically deserted for the majority of it. I tried to go there many times, but it was too much work. Out of all the books I only managed to read 2 Brazilian ones, A Guerra do Lanche, The Lunch War, and Blackout, which I remembered to this day in details. There were times where I legit thought about straight up ditching class to read some of them. I tried to get more. Like The Last Problem, Kafka's Metamorphosis, Ulysses, which I know I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I was just curious. A Brief Story of Time, Wuthering Heights, etc. But the amount of work it took was so much that it was just almost impossible to be able to read more than 1 or 2 books a year. And even that took dedication. Because I basically had to sacrifice part of my lunchtime. The rumor was that the principal's asterisk we had more than one, basically saw us as savages who would destroy the books if we were allowed to touch them, and even though they had no reason to believe so, the library worked well without those restrictions a year before I had gotten there. With only minimal incidents, and even those didn't result in the books getting destroyed. TLDR. My school made it very hard to read the huge amount of books they had. Many years ago when The Simpsons first came out, my school banned Bart Simpson t-shirts that said underachiever. It just sent the wrong message to students. So I wore my I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you t-shirt instead. Until they banned that one too. In high school, hair length on men and stubble. Look, a bunch of 15 to 16-year-old guys are going to have a bit of stubble no matter how thoroughly we shave. Forcing us to go to the principal's office to dry shave nearly daily is fucking absurd. I got in trouble for humming to myself in the bathroom and told I was disturbing another class. If you were cold, you had to buy a school jacket, which were $30. Students and their parents had a $% asterisk in ing field day with this rule. No body armor of any kind. The fuck was we gonna get body armor? Most of us barely could afford to go to school. The fact that this was a rule also makes me wonder what the fuck happened to make them institute this. Edit. Oh dear lord. So many upvotes. And a silver. Truly there is such a thing as kind strangers on Reddit. You all humble me. I am humbled. If you throw snowballs, you get a 1-day suspension. The first long weekend after a snowfall, everyone would throw snowballs to get an additional day added to the long weekend. A few weird ones and their reasoning behind making them. Girls weren't allowed to wear tops with spaghetti straps because they could be easily cut with scissors. No tube tops either, because they could easily be pulled down. No bra straps showing whatsoever, because it was considered indecent. No soft drinks with actual sugar because if it spilled it would make a sticky mess. Diet soft drinks were fine because they wouldn't get as sticky. No beverages of any kind, only in certain classrooms. Depending on who the teacher was. Not like computer labs where it was obvious drinks shouldn't be allowed. I'm talking like random math or history classes based on who your teacher was. Whereas the same class taught by a different teacher, it was allowed. Because fuck you if you're thirsty. No shirts from the company Billabong because it says bong and that's a drug reference. And last but not least, because this one is a really funny one and I'm hoping someone from my class sees this and can confirm. No wearing the Alice in Wonderland joint-smoking caterpillar shirts that we designed for homecoming week because that's absolutely not a paintbrush. This one makes sense. No idea how it got approved. Edit. Since a lot of people requested a picture of the shirt. A. 9 Ravik. The best part was the assistant principal firing up the PA about 20 minutes into first period. Attention students. Will the entire sophomore class please report to the auditorium for a mandatory meeting? You know why. Thank you. After 9/11, my school instituted a zero-tolerance policy on bullying and violence. What 9/11 had to do with bullying? I don't know. Anyways, Halloween 2001, I dressed up as the guy from Clockwork Orange. He carries a cane around. The principal pulled me aside. Told me walking around with a cane could be a weapon. Therefore just walking with it is an act of violence. And suspended me for a couple of days. Telling me that after 9/11, we don't mess around with that kind of stuff. Edit. This happened in Quebec. In a small town. My school had 3 staircases along a very long corridor. We were banned from using the middle staircase because it got overcrowded. The ban was lifted once they realized it only made the other 2 staircases just as crowded. No hot drinks. Rumor said it was because the principal burnt himself while drinking something, so he banned it. Girls must have a male escort them to prom as their date. If your date bails, you can't enter. We were an all-girls school. Many of us had 0 guy friends. Finding dates was hard. I remember one year a girl's boyfriend dumped her when everyone was starting to show up for photos. She showed up at the venue. Mascara running. Begging the principal to let her go in. Principal wouldn't let her. One of the senior homeroom teachers ended up calling her nephew and said, "I need you to put on your suit and get here ASAP." He showed up with flowers and everything. So it was salvageable but totally avoidable. The worst part? It wasn't always a rule until one year a group of girls went as friends and kept stealing other people's dates. Way to punish everyone forever because of one group of bitches. That if you say, do anything back to your bully, it becomes a mutual conflict and isn't bullying. So if they start calling you slurs and making you feel bad every day and you call them stupid once or twice, the school probably won't help. Also, dress code required school-branded hoodies. They were $50. If you wore a non-school hoodie, you got in school suspension. A kid went to the hospital after falling from a wall. Then the school painted yellow lines around the school as a border which the kids weren't allowed to cross. So the teachers had to stand guard and make sure no one crossed it. Yo-yos. Somehow it became a thing in high school and, well, eventually they got banned. We were not allowed to have facial hair at all. Like to the point where the principal would walk around during lunch with razors and shaving cream and do stubble checks. Absolutely ridiculous, and he would send tons of us to the bathrooms to shave during lunch. No matter how small the stubble was. You could only go to the bathroom twice a day. Once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Mind you, this is from 8 to 3 and you had to get a new pass every week and keep it the whole time or you couldn't use the bathroom. Edit. This was Prec 8th grade. We actually had a dealer who would make fake passes, so they had to start color-coding them. They got rid of this rule a month before I graduated. Edit 2. My new high school has a just go policy, and they have no issues. I'm loving it lol. Edit 3 lol. They actually encourage drinking water, at least half your body weight crap, and would have times to drink water from the many water fountains. The hypocrisy. L. Women's thighs are not allowed to touch a chair. I got Saturday school for missing a day of classes when I was 16. Seems reasonable. Except I missed to go complete my US citizenship and officially become a citizen alongside my mom. It took us 12 years to go through the legal process. BTW. Whole other issue. I had a note from my mother as well as a signed official federal form they give you to explain to school, employers why you were absent. Apparently the only acceptable absence excuse was illness. I got punished for becoming a citizen woman facepalming. I went to school in the 90s and the school banned us from having pagers. My high school had coordinates, not a uniform, but they stopped selling the shorts like a decade before I started there. So me and a bunch of buddies tracked down used pairs and started wearing them. Next year, shorts were banned outright, so me and a bunch of buddies on the rugby team started wearing skirts. Because the rule said skirts were acceptable, but didn't specify gender. So you had a bunch of guys with hairy legs walking around in skirts. We deliberately hiked up a little to show some thigh. Shorts were allowed again in a week. My school banned water bottles. A water drinking fad started at my school. Mostly among girls. And soon all of them were walking around carrying plastic purified water bottles from the major brands. They all wanted to look health conscious and cool. But then it became a matter of showing off who can be the most healthy and hydrated. So having a mere 750 milliliters bottle wasn't enough anymore. So the girls began bringing larger and larger water bottles and jugs to school to outshine one another. Eventually they began carrying 5L plastic jugs with them all over the school grounds. It looked silly. Eventually the guys jumped on board the fad and brought even larger water containers to school. One guy brought a baggage trolley to school on which he transported a 20L industrial water dispenser bottle. An NBSP. At this point the principal had had enough. It was a posh, image-conscious school with fancy uniforms, and he didn't like seeing the students all lugging around big plastic jugs of water, looking like homeless people. So he banned any and all water bottles from school and told the students to drink water from the bathroom taps and other drinking fountains. This is dumb because drinking water regularly is healthy. He could have simply banned all bottles over 750 milliliters and could have simply told us to keep the bottles hidden away in our bags and out of sight when walking around between classes. No unnatural hair colors. Except for Lily, who dyed her hair the school color, maroon. It was dark enough to argue it was a weird red-brown. But it was clearly maroon, and I think she got away with it because it was school spirit. You had to have black shoelaces. No dark blue. No white. No gray. Only black. There was also the rule your tie had to be a minimum length. So sometimes one of the assistant head teachers would come in and measure the length of your tie with a ruler. You had to wear your ID around your neck on a rope thing. Then the choking started. In high school, the supervisor told the prefects and head girls to break up girls hugging in the hallways. I went to an only girls' school and teachers discouraged girls from hugging each other. Apparently they thought that it encouraged lesbianism. SMH. In the late 90s in my elementary school, Pokemon cards were banned. Candy canes were outlawed because you could sharpen them to a point and use them as a shiv. I went to school in rural Washington. We definitely weren't somewhere that shankings were to be expected. We weren't allowed to have personal drinks in classroom unless we had doctor's note. I spent 2 years in a private Christian school where girls could not wear skirts or dresses unless it covered their whole legs all the way down to their feet. We were between 3 and 8 years old, and that rule was meant to make sure boys wouldn't have any sexual temptation. This is not a joke. Couldn't shit in the potted plants right outside the cafeteria door. Stupid fascists. Prom was a mandatory lockdown for the night in order to avoid students going to parties after prom. Prom was held at various house parties across town instead. Not being allowed to wear hoodies, jackets, or sweaters that lacked the official school logo. I was a high school teacher for several years. Both buildings I worked in were freezing. And having admin pull students out of my classroom during a 50-minute period and giving them detention instead of letting them learn is cruel and completely unnecessary, in my opinion. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.